sons that were slain for minimal gain. Youth that can't read, speech that can't talk, passion to move, but love that won't walk. I speak to you, my heart and my soul, my family and folks, what I surely owe. My 100 double O, nigga, ride a flow to the beat. Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Education is the Best Medicine. And thanks for watching. Remember, community public access is your best bet. Watch it whenever you can, and please support community access whenever you can. I have in my hand, or on my lap, a report. It's called A Community Approach for African American Congruent Services. And its authors is one young lady right here, Miss Irma Brown. This is a discussion from the organization that I work with and am a part of, the African American Black Professionals Community Network, primary organization, and we'll be hearing her name a lot is Barbara Coleman. Thank you, Barbara Coleman, for your assistance in putting this series of shows together. Mrs. Parker did the section on education, and I want her to talk a little bit about this, and want to have a little discussion around the development of the report, because one of her passions is education. And I think that when we get through talking to her, you'll realize why I realize one of her passions is education. Ms. Parker, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being a member of the African American Professional Association. We are a organization on the move, and this is a part of the series that we want to bring to the table on this report just produced by the organization. Your report was on education. Tell us a little bit about your report as relates to education, in particular secondary education for our high school and middle school students.
Okay, as you stated, my passion is education. I know that in order for our young people to, be able to move ahead and be successful in life, they must get a good education. Not only a good education, but an equitable education. It needs to be equal, and it needs to be where these kids are viewed as, able to receive a world-class education just like everybody else, because that is what moves them, and that's what makes them successful.
Tell us a little bit about the report, some of the interesting things that you found, and some things that you didn't know, even though you really are one of our stalwarts in education.
Well,
or you didn't know anything, you knew this already, and it was just kind of like reaffirming what you already knew.
Kind of, there are some things that we really don't know. A lot of times we don't have time to read all the data that's out there. So I was surprised that, some of the data that I read that this report has generated. But there was a group of us talking about, trying to figure out why is it that African American students are not, successful in from elementary through the middle schools and then in high school. Berkeley High is a place where I meet most of the students, and they just seem to be so unprepared. And we was trying to figure out, why is this? So we put our heads together and we started to try to come up with some of the reasons why we thought that our kids were being unsuccessful. And then we tried to figure out, if we find out the reasons why they're unsuccessful, what is it we can do to try to help these young people to be successful? We know that there has to be, really, really good parent involvement, and we just, started looking at a whole lot of different areas, from the mental health part of these children's lives. We know a lot of these kids are traumatized in, relationships between their mothers and fathers at home, loved ones being killed in the street, from teenage violence, and just a host of other things. So we tried to figure out, for me, I was really bothered about the fact that so many young brothers were, killing each other on the street. And I thought, is it at the hands of kids who are being, not successfully educated. Because we feel that if these kids had something better to do, that they knew better and was educated and had, higher hopes in life, that they could move on to institutions of higher learning, then that maybe we wouldn't have so much violence against, one-on-one against African American brothers.
In this report, and I'll throw out some terms because it kind of launches with my concept. Some would say that our schools manufacture a prison pipeline. That if young men don't complete ninth grade, don't get to high school, don't graduate from high school, it's almost assuredly they're going to prison. Is that some of the data that we find from the fact that our kids are not successful in not completing, they are more likely to be incarcerated?
Yes, especially with African American males. The report shows that from grades fourth, that young boys, they are tracked. And
grades fourth grade?
From grade 4.
Okay.
That if they're not successful, especially in reading, that the prisons are being built. They're laying in wait and looking at the data to see how many young, African American brothers are not making it, even 9 and 10, and they can't read, they can't really achieve in school. They know that these kids will more than likely end up in the prison system. And with the industrialized prison complex right now, it sort of seems like it's big business, and they need people there to do, the work, because that, again, is big business.
Angela Davis, in a lot of her cutting edge, and I think about the first person that I heard articulately describe the systematic enslavement of us in the criminal justice system, starts with a base of not having education, and then it moves forward. So always we're seeing that either we're not educated enough, or sometimes we're too smart for our own good.
Well, I think it's not that we're too smart for our own good. I always feel that people, when they know better, they do better.
Okay.
I think that it is a lack of our young men being educated, and especially young boys from second grade, from what I've seen in the school system. It starts in elementary school, second grade. They are diagnosed or as kids with learning disabilities. Everybody's got special ed. And then there seems to be like these kids are warehoused. I don't see the programs that's put in place early on in elementary school that will help these young brothers to be able to, move up the ladder and get better academically, so that by the time they get to high school, that they do feel good about themselves. And what happens is, from what I've noticed, from elementary on, because I have volunteered at a lot of the schools, so you get to observe, some different things, that these young kids, what they do is they gravitate to one another, because there's a stigma even in the schools where kids who do very well, they don't want to be identified with the kids who are in special ed. I know for a fact there used to be kids who were in the special ed classes. They would always hang out in the the hallways. After the bell, they want to wait till the bell rings and everybody else go into class. So one day I approached some young men and I said, "Why are you guys, not in class? You're supposed to be in class." They said, "We don't want anybody to see us go into the special ed class because they make fun of us." So I see them do. Not only do I feel they become warehoused because they don't get the kind of training that they should academically to be able to achieve as well as some of the other kids, because they are already so far behind. And I think it starts out in the elementary level where they are not being taught.
And so some of my question is, how much is this a systemic effect? And as we see in my lifetime, us never able to achieve the standardized testing score averages, us never able to appear to get enough of the specialty classes. It appears that our teachers tend to be young white females that are frightened of us. Again, so some of this has to do with structure and as opposed to individual. So I guess my point is, what does the report say about not so much the individual effect, but the systemic effect of undereducating and over-criminalizing our kids?
Well, I think that absolutely right. We do know that most of the teachers that young black males have are white, young white females, and they do fear, teaching
You know how I know that?
our boys.
You know how I know that? Because that's what I grew up with.
Yes.
And that was, I'm 55 now, so as I can remember teaching, I remember a young white female in the 3rd grade, and she was frightening me.
Yes, that
She
is
married a
very-
brother, but she was frightening me.
Okay, it's very prevalent. Well, we can't talk about who
Okay.
falls in love.
You gotta
with
fall
who.
in love with it.
You gotta fall in love with whoever you fall in love with, and that's all right with me. But it is a fact that I think that because African American boys tend to be, tall and kind of
Good looking.
well, good looking and a little bit
Yeah.
maybe maybe a little heavier build. I think that they to white young white teachers, they propose this threat where they feel that they need to be afraid of them. I don't think that I've ever heard of a case where a young brother has threatened to attack a black teacher. I mean, I've been around for a while now and I haven't heard this. But I want to get back to the other point that you made. I think that the whole thing with criminalizing us, our young boys, even though we have the young white teachers who are teaching them, a lot of it starts with our parents, because a lot of the parents don't even understand, according to, like you say, the STAR testing, they don't understand what their kids should be learning from kindergarten to 1st grade, from 1st grade to 2nd grade. They don't know how to measure it. So as a result, a lot of our children are being, just sort of left behind because the parents won't come into the school.
And that's kind of interesting because when we talk about people of color families, particularly African American, there is not an absence of reading. African American folks read. They read a lot. In fact, they continue to still buy books more so, and have not been able to go to the forms of book issue because they're so used to the paper book, and we're so used to having a book in our hand. And I guess that it seems kind of an oxymoron and a real dichotomy that on one hand we're reading more, but it seems that our children are learning less.
Yeah, well, again, I think that there are low expectations in the classroom. That these kids they didn't come in from the private schools, so they have not been educated as well. I mean, we see this all the time, and it's sort of like they're separated out. That certain kids, if they are low achievers, they are all sort of put. I don't want to call it tracking, but they are sort of grouped together. And
Well,
kids who are
but
higher
that's what it
achievers,
is,
that's
though.
yeah,
I mean,
it
but
is.
that's
I
what
mean,
it is,
it's
tracking.
it's
Yeah,
tracking to
yeah.
me too. But they still want to say that, well, these are kids who really need more help, and we put them here so that they can get the help. But unfortunately, the help that our kids need, and a lot of students have said to me, I don't get it. When the teacher is teaching, it's like the other kids understand what's being, what she's saying, but it's like she's not talking to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? They said, I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. I can't explain it. But it's the way the teacher is teaching that white kids understand what, what the teacher is saying. But it's like she's speaking Greek to us. They don't get it.
So that's why the report has a cultural competence base in it.
Right.
And that's why we want to emphasize it, because as in mental health and now in education, we all learn at different speeds. We all have different needs. We all have different kind of skills we bring to the table and skills that we lack, And let's be clear about it. This is just not African American kids. When you look at California in terms of skills-based society, we lack the skills to occupy the 38% of the jobs that are available. So it's not just the fact that African American kids aren't learning or not getting the skill set. This is the overall systems problem now, and it is. And the reason why I think it's because it does affect our competitiveness in the society. It does affect our ability to do and move globally. We're going to have an absence of skilled short workers. We're going to have an absence of skilled educated workers in the next 10, 15 years easy.
Right, and I would agree with you that not only African American kids are low achievers. There are other races of kids that's, I won't say right now. If you look at the data, African American kids are at the very bottom of pretty much of everything. But there are a lot of other kids. The focus is just not being put on the other students that is sort of riding neck and neck with some of these
Well,
African American
it's
students.
just like violence. Violence happens in all communities. It just doesn't happen in African American communities. I received an email from Barbara Coleman, and in which she stated that although whites continue to have a majority of the drug offenses, it's the men of color, particularly men of color, spend more time in jail for the same offense. So there's definitely some issues, and I think that this goes from a historical concept in terms of whether you could educate a person of color. Was it legal to educate a person of color? What would happen if you were found with a book? What would happen if you were found being taught to read or do letters? What would happen if your friend, who happened to be a little white child, taught you how to say words? What would happen to her? So we have a whole history of a miseducation of the African American, or some would say a miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, which is another discussion about elite African education. I think it's more substances. What are some of the things in the what are some of the objects in the report that you want to emphasize, and what are some of our keys to kind of turning this around in terms of the report?
Okay, I before I get to that, could I just
Please
go back to something else that you said that was very important? I think that what we have to understand about the whole realm of competitiveness is that I think most people don't understand that this, there has to be a subservient, group of people. There has to be people who are going to be at the top, who's going to be the managers, the CEOs,
caste system.
the caste system, and then you're going to have the people there who's going to be flipping the burgers, so that when the CEO's kids come by, or the CEO come by himself, if he wants a McDonald's, you need to be Johnny on the spot to be there to give them, to serve them, to make sure the floors are clean and the windows are washed. So
he wants to date the worker who's been his housemaid for 20 years and do that kind of stuff.
Well, I don't want to get off into that, but
okay.
Again, to each his own.
Plantation mentality is ongoing,
right? And the other thing that we that we have to just understand is that we have to get to a point to where we have to make our kids understand that we come from greatness, that we come from kings and queens, that we are somebody. I think that too many of our kids now are living a life where they feel there's no hope, that I am not valued. I am, I'm a black male, I'm just indispensable. Nobody cares about me. You know what, if I don't live tomorrow, who cares? And I think we have to move our young people into a state where they know who they are.
Proactive and feeling safe.
Self-identity, yes.
Yeah, and I think also, first of all, I want to thank you for your work in PCAT.
Oh, sure.
You're not new to the game. You've been having this discussion for a long time, whether people want to hear you or not hear you. They say that true power comes from the ability to tell the head of GM what to do and then make them do it. So and that's what we need to be about, making folks do this. I would like to put this out as a special discussion in our community, not just Berkeley community, that the fact that we can no longer have communities that feel that the education of their children is the only important education that needs to take place. I think that particularly I've seen in places like Berkeley where the parent groups have come out whenever money was to change hands for special education versus the college prep classes, and for individuals that were already getting those classes, it seemed kind of sad to me that you wouldn't want to share those funds with people and students that needed those to sometimes just get basic skills.
Well, again, we go back to the area of competitiveness. no one wants. I mean, if you give children a chance, and it's a given that African American people can take nothing and make something out of it, and people know it. You know, throw us lemon, we make lemonade. Give us a lime, we'll make limeade.
All right.
So the thing of the whole matter is that if I can keep your child down so that my child remains up, then I'm just going to do whatever I need to do. And we see that on a daily basis. And what we have to do, getting back to something you said again, is to be able to stand up as Americans, you know, Black Americans, and speak out. And not me, I don't really have a problem. I think maybe some people might have problems with me, and that's okay. But I think that we have to not allow people to treat us a certain way. We have to stand up. We have to call it by its name.
You just call a wicked man wicked to his face.
Until you call it by its name, nothing is going to be solved. We will be talking about this issue just like you and I are sitting here discussing it now, 20,000 years from now, if we live that long on this earth. Because you got to be able to not feel like I'm offending somebody who doesn't, you know, have a problem when it comes to making you feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
So we need to sit down. This city of Berkeley needs to sit down with all of its constituents here and all of our citizens and have a real conversation about what's the right thing to do.
And basically that's what should motivate us. You know, when all of us, when one of us rises, all of us should rise.
Right.
You know, all waters should raise ships to the same tide, and that's all we're asking. We're not asking for anything better. We're asking for the same support that is needed in order for us to be a competitive American society with all hands on deck. We talked about your passion for education, and we also talked about, you know, charter schools and programs like Upward Bound. And I'll give people a little background. Upward Bound, for me, as a young African American in high school, was one of the most unique programs I could ever went to. It allowed me to go and take college classes on the weekend and have interactions with all students over there. In that case, the 5 or 6 high schools in Oakland, which were where I was going. It was a rich experience. The teachers were young, rich people, men of color, women of color that we could relate to and have conversation with, and the education was cutting edge. Well, my last check was that Upward Bound was being decimated on a lot of college campuses, and that when it wasn't, it was becoming an elite program for those folks already headed for college. That side issue around charter schools and how charter schools as a whole may be good for some, but unless you can afford the tuition, it's not very good for us.
Well, charter schools basically, I think they are not, you don't have to worry about paying the tuition. It's about being chosen to get in, because they have the ability to choose who come into their school. That's the one thing that really I think make this whole charter school business, to me, not desirable for our children, because if it's African American, especially males, that's the undesirable ones, then they're not going to get chosen. And so they are left to lament, you know, out in the public school system and ending up in the continuation schools with you know, little or nothing left.
Does the report discuss, and in your mind, not necessarily the report, discussion around testing, uniform testing, the benefits, the pros and cons versus the kind of testing we've been exposed to? Because what we're finding, and what been my experience, you can correct me, that the testing, one, does not repeat real world situations, and people that do well on tests may not be doing well in the real world. I think it's somehow we need to again change this format about how we evaluate folks and how we really do teach and learn.
Well, we didn't really, I know from my perspective, and we did have different people in the group, you know, who we got together and brainstormed and, you know, chose some pieces that's in that. Not all of the report on education in here, you know, comes from me. There are other people in the group who added to the report. But we didn't really talk about, you know, that aspect of it. But what we did talk about was that there needs to be certain, you know, programs that's in the school that's conducive to our own cultures in relation to African American students, learning about themselves, that we need more black teachers, especially black males, who could serve as role models for our young men. And we also talked about, classes that would be more culturally based, competent, yes, for African
Culturally
American students.
congruent, culturally competent, which is the name of our report. We've got about 2 minutes, and I usually give the final word, but I want to, again, thank you personally for your work around education, not only the Berkeley community, but the Bay Area and definitely the world. I think you've been a beacon of light. And when I first met you and we interviewed you in regards to PCAT,
yes.
I was sure that we definitely are proud to have a jewel like yourself. Thank the hubby too; he's really been supportive, and I want to thank him also. Final word in regards to the report on education and your thoughts on it.
Well, I'm just hoping that this report will generate an interest amongst our people, that it will, really get them out and realize that there are some people who did, a lot of hard work, a lot of research to make sure. All we did was we took the data that the district and the city of Berkeley and the things from the 2020 vision plan that they said they was going to do to help improve education so that our kids could be successful, and we put it back in their court. We said, these are the things you said you're going to do, and that's what this report reflects. It's nothing that we conjured up. It's things that we're saying that you promised to do this for our children, and we expect you to do it. And and we're going to put it out here to our neighbors, and we hope that people will come out. We plan to have some town hall meetings, and we want people to come out and really get to understand what this report is all about, and engage it and discuss it. And then let's come out to the school board. Let's make our elected officials do the job that we that we put them up there and we're paying them to do.
Well, with that being said, I want to thank you for coming on. I think that if education is a key, and education is the best medicine, not only do we have a key, we have someone with the key to open the lock and to keep us thinking and engaged for our kids and for ourselves. I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for bringing light to a very dark world. Irma Parker, if visions are seeing things you haven't seen, and truly you are a visionary, I want to thank you. And Barbara Coleman for all that you do. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Very much. Thank you.